Hey everybody, it is late at night and I'm Norman. If you saw my latest vacation video, you know that my wife and I took a trip to Greece to celebrate 1 year delayed our 25th anniversary. Tonight's video is gonna be a long one because I'm gonna tell some of the stories, crazy stories, as well as the mundane ones from this trip. So it'll kind of be like watching a podcast. So you could turn your screen off and just listen to it and enjoy, but let us begin. Alright, so we were both pretty excited for this trip. My wife is a super skilled researcher, and she had been obsessively researching Greece. We were watching Greek movies. We listened to the Iliad, all 1 million hours of it. And we listened to other podcasts on the history of Greece and the mythology and whatnot. I was even trying to learn the language, but man, Greek is tough. I mean, you have to learn the letters as well as the language. Yeah. And for some reason, the words just didn't stick. But I did get down please, thank you, hello, good day, good evening, touristy stuff. So we had a layover in Paris. It was quite a long flight. It was like 8 hours from here to Paris. And I was super stoked, even though we would only get to see the inside of the airport, to be in France. I've been trying to teach myself French for almost 2 years, has it been? On Duolingo, I have like an over 600-day streak going. But I am not good at French at all. I can sort of read some of it. I could sort of hear and understand what's being said. Can I actually formulate the most basic of sentences on my own? No, I cannot. So all the way there, I was watching movies on the airplane in French. I saw an amazing French movie, Mon Crime, which was amazing. It was hilarious, entertaining, just great movie. I recommend it. And I think there was 1 or 2 brilliant watches in there, if I remember correctly. Anyway, I was pretty stoked to be surrounded by the French language, and the French airport is pretty great if you're a watch nerd. So I got to see a swatch booth that was in the middle of the aisle. Got to see the new square swatches, and they look pretty great in person. I feel like at some point I may need to get my hands on one. Yeah, they looked pretty cool. There was also an AD there that had a bunch of Omegas, and I actually got to see some modern day Omega DeVilles. And it's so crazy, every time I go to a watch shop, I'm always surprised, even with dress watches, at how big and chunky they are. Even the contemporary DeVilles were just big. Kind of sad when the only DeVilles you've seen are the vintage ones that are just Don Draper brilliant. But they had a moon watch reduced there, and I realize those are super ubiquitous, but man, they look great. There was one Hermès watch that looked pretty cool. The rest were just gaudy and not so cool at all. But yeah, I think I saw like 3 or 4 different watch shops in that airport. It was pretty awesome. So we didn't get much sleep on that flight, and we were really hoping that our short flight from Paris to Greece, we would get some actual sleep, but man, that was the most uncomfortable airplane I have ever been on in my life. We were sitting completely upright in our seats, and our knees were still absolutely jammed into the seat in front of us, so we did not get any sleep. So our first day in Athens, we were just exhausted. So when we landed, our only goal was to get some food and come back to the hotel and crash. So it was dark, kind of getting late, and we ended up in kind of the seedy market area. It was a little bit creepy, but we did find a restaurant there with some just brilliant food. So that was my first actual taste of Greek food. The next day we did like an 8-hour tour of everything. So we saw the Acropolis and Corinth and all of the super ancient spots. The restaurant in our hotel actually overlooks the Acropolis, which is pretty amazing. So we were staying at the Grand Britannia, I think it's pronounced, which is a super nice hotel. And our first room, which will make sense later, had a window that overlooked the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So we could look out our window and see the soldiers out there in their traditional Greek garb doing their marching and choreography, and that was pretty cool to see. And you get to hear them stomping and pounding their rifles into the ground. And we were given a free bottle of champagne. Okay, so now here is the first of the crazy stories. So our third day, I think it was, at our hotel, we came down from our room, and all of a sudden there was metal detectors and all kinds of security at the front doors. And so we went out and tooled around a bit. When we came in, we had to go through the metal detectors there. And my wife went to the officer that was manning it and was asking him who was at our hotel. I mean, this wasn't here before. And he got a bit uncomfortable and was like, I can't tell you, ma'am. And so she did a bit of Googling and found out that Zelensky was in our hotel. And at first we thought perhaps he was going to be eating in our restaurant. And that was the night that we had reservations at the restaurant. But that wasn't the case. It was still pretty insane. So that night we stood across the street and watched all the cars arriving with their police escorts surrounding them. And then when they stopped, someone would search the trunk before the people got out of the cars and were quickly rushed into the hotel. That was wild. And it was just car after car after car. So anyway, after spending a few days in Athens, we made our way over to Santorini. So that was a super quick flight. Pretty much as soon as you're at cruising altitude, it's time to start descending again. And Santorini is a gorgeous, gorgeous island. It's no wonder why it's on postcards and flowing dress pictures, which I was completely unaware of before this vacation. But that comes into play in my next crazy story. But the drivers in Greece, and especially on Santorini, are hardcore. Wow. I mean, if you're a pedestrian, you have to dive out of their way, but they don't even care about other cars. They're just flying down these roads that are so tiny, they're basically one-lane roads, and just passing each other within inches. Just madness. Madness. They're crazy skilled drivers there, and just terrifying. In fact, we were walking back to our hotel on Santorini, and I had to dive into the bushes in order to not be taken out by a rear view mirror of a car that was flying by, and it still just missed me by like an inch. So crazy. So our hotel in Santorini was crazy. I have never stayed at a hotel like this before. So we pulled up, got out of the taxi, and went into the lobby area, and everybody was dressed in light cream Nehru-colored button-ups with matching pants. They kind of looked like cultists. It was wild. And as soon as we walked in, everyone stopped what they were doing, and someone came over and had us sit down on a couch, and they were like, "Sit here, we'll bring out some waters for you." And they brought out glasses of ice cold lime and cucumber water. Crazy. And then a consultant came over with a big fancy booklet to give to us and walked through all the amenities and whatnot. And while this was happening, our luggage was being transported to the room. So then we walked to our room, and it is the typical Santorini style with the rounded roof. And it was all concrete. The floor, the wall, the ceiling. There was lights under the bed and the couch. Just wild. The whole bathroom was cement as well, even the shower. And that was pretty crazy because while you're washing, the shower is actually kind of singing to you. because the sound of the water hitting the cement and the metal shelving and stuff makes a bizarre chiming sound. It was wild. And we had our own little deck with a tiny little hot tub there. It was super great. So my next crazy story, and then I promise we'll get to some watches. My next crazy story we did, I think it was a 6-hour tour. And the idea of this tour was it covered the entire island. So after it, we would have seen everything by land. And our tour guide is what makes this story crazy. So we get into the car and he starts driving and he tells us, "You have taken a tour with the George. The George is the best tour guide in the world. You will speak of nothing but the George after this tour. I will show you the best of the best on the island. No other tourist will show you the things and give you the secrets and the knowledge that I will give you because I am the George." And that went on like that throughout the entire tour, all 6 hours. And we were walking through the area where all the ladies do their flowing dress pictures. And that was when I first encountered that phenomenon. And we rounded the corner and they were right there in the sidewalk changing into their dresses. And the George went over there and started yelling at them in Greek. And their tour guide was getting mad and yelling back at him. Everyone was calling him a jerk and rude, and he was shooing them off and telling them it wasn't a changing room, that we needed to take pictures. It was pretty entertaining. And on this tour, he took 1,000,000 pictures of my wife and I standing in front of stuff, which is kind of a bummer because I really only need 1 or 2 of those pictures, and then just some pictures of the stuff would be fine. But we did a wine tasting, at which point he would come up and mess with our food. Like, we didn't have enough olive oil on our fava beans, so he started dumping it all over our fava beans, and yeah. But we did like the VIP wine tour, so we got some extra wine, and that was pretty great. But as the tour went on, he kind of got crazier and crazier. So he was calling all the tourists stupid, and people who pay for beachfront spots for tons of money, and bungalows and whatnot, calling them stupid. And then later on, he was telling us about how he's able to walk around packing heat, and if anyone gave him grief, he could end them and never do time because of his previous job. And we were just looking at each other like, did you work for the mob before this? Oh yes, and he was telling us about how he had never done any tourism for a living at all before getting this job, and he gets paid more than any other tourist in Santorini, or I don't even know the scope that he was including, maybe the whole world. But he walked in there and the George is the George, so he just got the job. And he kept telling us about how he always gets 5 stars and he always gets the biggest tips. So by the end of that tour, we had gone back to our hotel and we were getting ready to get some food and stuff, and I asked my wife if she gave him 5 stars, and she said she couldn't figure out how to do that. And I was telling her he's going to show up at our hotel and ask us if we gave him 5 stars. Yeah. Later on, as we were walking after the sunset, there was a bunch of people lined up where people get photographs as the sun is setting. And I said to my wife, you know, if the George was here, I'm pretty sure he would say something like, look at these tourists, they stupid. The sun has already set. What are they waiting for? Do they think it's going to change its mind? The George. So apparently while we were on Santorini, the Prime Minister of India was in our hotel. And over at Santorini, we got to see a Panerai AD, and I'm still not a huge Panerai fan. I mean, I appreciate their uniqueness, the uniqueness of their aesthetic and stuff, but yeah. I was looking for a Panerai that I might like in that AD and just didn't find anything. So after a few days on Santorini, we went back to Athens. And now that we are back in Athens, I wanted to hit some watch shops. So when we were on one of our tours, I think it was the food tour, I noticed a couple ADs on a street, and I didn't realize where that street was until we had circled back and passed it again, and I realized it was right behind our hotel. It wasn't even a block away. So I made it a point to visit that AD, and this was pretty crazy as well. So around here, when I visited watch ADs, they're like just a typical shop. Maybe they have extra security at the door, so you have to buzz in or wait for someone to open the door, but you just peruse the place and look at watches and whatnot. This one was pretty wild. So they had the big heavies there. I think they had Piaget there. They had some Vacheron Constantins, some Patek Philippe's. They had all the big top tier stuff, period. So I had to go in there. And I was hoping to be able to try something on. Or at least peruse and see what crazy pieces they had there. So we went to the door and it was locked. We had to wait to be buzzed in. They buzzed us in, we walked in, and the whole place was empty. There was absolutely nothing in there. And so we got called over, and a lady sat down and had us sit down in seats across from her. And there was some watch books there, and she was like, "So what do you want me to bring out?" And we were like, "I don't know. I was hoping to be able to kind of look at what you had." And she was like, "Well, you can look through these books here and decide what you want me to bring out." At which point, my wife pointed out, we aren't going to be buying anything. We just wanted to look at a couple pieces. And immediately, she stood up and walked us to the front door and said, "Here you go, goodbye. You can look at our watches through the window from the sidewalk." That was pretty great. That was fun. But yeah, on this trip, I wore pretty much my Smith's Everest almost the entire time. I had whittled down the amount of watches I was going to bring to 3. I brought the Smith's Everest, I brought the Armida, the 36mm dive watch, and I brought the pull router. And if you've seen the video on the pull router after the trip, you'll know that I noticed a bit of moisture in it after being out in the super hot Greek weather and then came back to our cool hotel, and that change in temperature was enough to cause some condensation on the inside of it. I don't think it's actually an uncommon amount, but I'm still probably going to take some steps to see if I can dry it out even more. But I did wear the Armida poolside, but it was pretty much the Everest the whole time. But that was an absolutely amazing trip. I highly recommend, if you can get out there somehow, to visit Greece. We did another lengthy tour, I think it was 6 hours, after we did the Santorini full island tour, and this was a tour from on the water. And that was absolutely amazing. Something about being on a boat, it doesn't even feel like you're on a tour. Some of the other tours got kind of tedious after a while because they were just so long and you're just sitting in a car or getting out, looking at some ancient stuff, getting back in the car. But the boat was just amazing. Yeah. So we went along the Santorini coast. They cooked us some food on the boat. Brilliant food. We got to swim in the Aegean Sea. We actually swam in a volcano. So you get out of the boat and you're swimming in the super blue water, and all of a sudden it turns greenish, brownish, gross, and it smells like eggs, and then it gets warm like a hot tub. And you swim into this inlet, and my wife and I swam all the way into that, where we actually saw an old hotel sign from maybe the 1950s even, who knows. Probably the 80s, 90s or something, but it was really old and weathered. And it's interesting because I feel like very few people swim all the way into there, so we might be one of a few people who've seen that sign. But brilliant trip, I highly recommend it. Great watch spotting. And that was another crazy thing, was the watches that I kept seeing on people. It's amazing to me when you're taking a tour from a tour guide who's wearing a Rolex. tour guides make enough to buy Rolexes? That's crazy. There were so many Rolexes. So many. It wasn't even funny. At one of our layovers, we were sitting there right next to a guy with his family, and he was wearing a Daytona. There was another guy. I don't think he was wearing a particularly fancy watch, but his wife and all his daughters were wearing Rolexes and had piles and piles of like Gucci bags or something. Someone's rolling in it. I saw a moon swatch out in the wild there. But yeah, it was mainly Rolexes that I kept seeing, just all over the place. Wild. But there you have it, me rambling on about a trip to Greece, a little bit of watch stuff, and a couple crazy stories. Thanks for watching.